Okay, folks. So I wanted to share a little bit of information concerning all of this stuff going on with the aviation industry. Um, we have a pilot shortages going on too, and that's been ongoing for a while since they pretty much destroyed the airline industry and pretty much every other industry with their whole COVID operations, which I think is kind of interesting because now, as with any crisis, they never let a crisis go to waste, right? And I believe out of every crisis, there's always a group of people that end up in some permanent governmental position. And I'll be darned if they didn't do it with COVID too. This is an interesting story talking about the infectious disease doctor shortage that threatens future pandemic preparedness. And they're talking about how they need to invest more in the training and all that and make it, more reasonably priced to get the training. But born out of COVID was a permanent pandemic office, just like born out of 9/11 was the NSA. There's always these agencies and these people that end up in these permanent positions where they get paid a shit ton of money to tell us what we can and cannot do. And now we have the Office of Pandemic Preparedness and Response Policy is now a permanent installment in Washington. Yeah. So they never let a crisis go to waste. And as far as this pilot shortage, this is kind of scary a little bit because lately we've been having a whole lot of private planes flying right directly over our house. I mean, some of them come right directly over our house. And on any given day, I'm seeing a lot of these little private planes out here, practicing and doing loops. And I understand they have to do their training and everything. But we have so much open space out here where there is just like absolutely nothing. Maybe they could invest and put in like a little training airport that's specifically for training that these new pilots and trainees can, take off and land from instead of taking off from our major airports. And Henderson Executive seems to be a really big one that some of them come out of too, but the majority of them come out of the North Las Vegas airport. And I understand that the pilots have to have training. They have to have training hours and flight hours and all that stuff, but they don't need to be coming over the residential areas and coming right directly over our houses, especially when I'm, seeing reports about other small plane crashes and stuff. This one here was over in Plano, Texas. Just the pilot died after crashing into a shopping center parking lot, which is tragic. But I just don't trust new pilots. I just don't. I don't think they should be allowed to fly over populated areas and stuff. They're just asking for an accident. And this whole uh, crew of this Poseidon, this PA, this military plane that overshot the runway in Hawaii. It was my understanding that this was one of the most diverse crews ever in the history of our military. And that's not the reason why I don't trust this current military. I mean, that really doesn't have anything to do with it for me. I don't care how you identify. If you have a dedication and a commitment to serving this country and serving to protect our country, I don't care how you identify and what gender you are or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you're dedicated to it, that's a different story. But I myself think the majority of people enlisted and serving now are not the same type of people that enlisted 20, 30, 40 years ago. The mentality is way different, okay? For the people that are enlisted now and serving now, I believe the majority of them, it's a paycheck, it's a job, it's a career. It's a means for a living. They're not doing it because they care about the country and because they care about protecting and serving the citizens of this country. They do it for a fucking paycheck or for the bennies. Because a lot of them are offering all those bonuses of $50,000 here, $20,000 there, $80,000 over there, and I don't trust a military that has that type of a motivation. And that's what I believe our current military is, and our military has been for the last couple of decades. And I don't trust that kind of a military. I don't. There's a big difference between an individual that chooses to serve in the military and enlist because they genuinely care about their country and they genuinely care about our safety and our security and protecting our country's best interests. And someone that enlists and joins because within 5 years they're going to have all that money and those bennies to help pay for their so-called special educations. And that type of service is different than somebody who enlists because they actually care about the country. There's a big difference. And I myself personally believe that the majority of people enlisted and serving now in our military are not dedicated to it because they genuinely care about serving our country's best interest. It's a fucking paycheck. And this whole thing with this, we went running over to the end of the dock and I took some pictures. Yeah, I would be too, It was unbelievable. The Honolulu Fire Department received a 911 call for a downed aircraft shortly after 2 p.m. Spokesperson Malcolm K. Medrano said in an email. It was cloudy and rainy at the time, and visibility was about 1 mile, said the meteorologist. I'm just, it's pretty interesting. The plane belongs to the Skinny Dragons of Patrol Squadron 4, stationed at Whidbey Island in Washington state. Patrol squadrons were once based at Kaneohe Bay. I know I mispronounced that, but they now deploy to Hawaii on a rotational basis. I just, it's fishy. It's fishy. And this whole thing with the pilot shortage is kind of scary because we have a lot of privates, like I said, that come over. And the synchronicity in some things is kind of curious too. And doing just a little bit of research into this whole pilot shortage thing, I came across this article here that posted up from the Lansing State Journal, which is my hometown. I grew up in Lansing in Michigan. This was a story about a St. John's native who died in a plane crash in Tennessee. And it's interesting because I moved out here to Henderson like 6 years ago or so. And this particular character here actually lived in Henderson, Nevada. He was 37 years old. He was killed on November 15th. And it said apparently he was practicing some aerobatic maneuvers. And when his plane crashed. So just the synchronicity is interesting that this character would have lived in Henderson, Nevada too, where I'm at. But this is not just, a few stories here and there of planes crashing and stuff. This one here overseas in the Mediterranean. I don't know, the whole pilot shortage, and now there's airlines talking about pilot strikes. They've been asking permission to strike. I don't keep a heads up, folks. I don't know about y'all where you're at in your area, but we're in a pretty heavy flow of air traffic. It's there's several flight corridors that come through here, and unsettling. We'll say when I see these private planes coming right directly over our house, it's like I'm watching, and most of the time I've got a camera or two that are rolling, and we've got the roof cams up there. So I don't want any accidents, And this is another curious thing too. We have a lot of these planes like this. I mean, this is coming right directly almost over our house. A lot of these do that flight path, and that's new. It's in the last few years, it has changed and shifted enough with the magnetic lines here through the valley, through southern Nevada, that they've had to change up their flight paths because of it. And I think some of it is attributed to the fact that they have very large solar array fields that they have installed. So they keep talking about all these natural things going on with the magnetic fields and the magnetic shifts and all of that. But I don't think that it's all natural. It's not something that's happening without being influenced. And I think that some of these very large solar array fields, these photovoltaic solar array fields that we have around here, are definitely influencing our magnetic field, our electromagnetic field. I do. And I think that's why a lot of these planes that are coming right directly over our house, here's yet another one following the same path as the other one. I don't trust these pilots and planes. You can see they've shifted their flight path. It used to be a little bit more to the south over by Boulder City area. But since they put in those very large solar fields, it's shifted to the north. And now a lot of these come right directly over our house. And it doesn't matter whether they're up at 30,000 or 36,000 feet. Every time SkyWest United goes over, I get pinged and fluttered. And I don't. It's concerning to see this news story about this Navy plane. Because, nobody was hurt, right? Which is good. But what happens when or if something else to keep in mind, folks? It's something that's been on my mind ever since I started really doing some deeper research into our so-called EMP resilience programs and missions and objectives from the Department of Defense. At any given time over our country and over most of our major cities, with the exception of a lot of our air bases, Air Force bases, and military installations, we are just completely covered with all of these airplanes, okay? And now, I maybe misspoke a little bit about trusting the pilots. It's not really pilots that are flying these things. They're just kind of like passengers, And a lot of them are guided by computer systems. And we've had a lot of cyber attacks and stuff too, right? So, at any given time, folks, they could pop something off or, cut the communications with all of these freaking aircrafts. And what would you have? Think about that. just for a couple seconds. I'm not trying to scare anybody and I'm not trying to put the fear into anybody. It's just a really profound thought that at any given time they could pop something off here right over our country. And every one of these freaking planes that's up in the air becomes a fucking bomb, you know? I mean, look at the devastation it would have on this fucking country if all of a sudden communications were cut off from all of these fucking planes all at once at the same time, even if they just chose a certain area that was heavily populated, just to cut off that, and then boom, all these fucking planes. The pilot sitting there doesn't have a fucking clue because they don't have any control over it, and the control towers have no control over it, and they're just sitting there going down with the fucking ship, right? I just, those kind of thoughts have crept into my mind. And when I've done these real deep dives and research into the history of our Department of Defense and them um, doing their own little missions and objectives to harden military installations and the process of hardening their military installations and stuff against EMPs or HEMPs, as mentioned in their reports. But it's just a profound thought to think about. I just, it's a heavy thought, and it does weigh on me every day that I'm, tracking on flight tracker radar. It does kind of weigh a little bit on me because I got to wonder if today is going to be the day, or could it be next week, or could it be, next year? But at some point, I just think that that's in their scenarios, that it is written in their books already. And that's what they're preparing for because they know that it's going to happen because they're going to fucking make it happen. I just, it's profound thought. So just had to add that in there too. As if it plane, crashes over a populated area or something. I just, I wouldn't say that it's one of my worst nightmares if a plane were to crash into our house, but it's up there in my concerns right now, and I think it's a valid concern considering all of the news coming out about pilot shortages and pilot fatigue. And I just stay mindful, folks. I think that at any time they could pop off anything that they want, and they've proven to us that these people in control of the whole Matrix show are, they have a lot of little tricks up their sleeves, boy. And I don't know. I know the fan blades are getting pretty packed up with shit.